everyone, and welcome to the first official episode of Spill the Tea with Emery Lee, an author roundtable in which we get a bunch of marginalized authors and publishing professionals together, and we kind of delve into the nitty-gritty of how publishing works and some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that you don't really get as much insight on until you're actually part of publishing yourself. So today I am going to be hosting this episode with my friend Peter Lopez. Peter Lopez is a writer and dreamer who writes books about Latinx kids going on adventures in mystical worlds. And he's the creator and designer behind My LZ Design and the owner and host of Author Chat Room, which is a super laid-back author interview series. So say hello, Peter.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Emery, for having me on here.
Thank you for being here because this is actually really exciting because I first mentioned this roundtable on my Twitter a while back and people seemed really into it. So I figured it'd be really cool if we could actually make it happen. I should say, for anybody who doesn't know who I am Emery Lee. I am an author and an artist. I'm currently represented by Beth Phelan at the Galton Zacher Literary Agency. And I write mostly kid lit, YA, and middle grade, with a little sprinkling of adult every now and then. So today we're going to be talking about pitch contests. For those of you who don't know, a pitch contest is basically just a easier access way for people to kind of get their books in front of agents. It's supplementary to querying, and it basically gives people the chance to write their story as a short elevator pitch that they can then post on Twitter, and then agents and editors will request if they're interested in seeing more about those stories. And so today we gathered 5 authors who have all participated in pitch contests before, some of whom got their agents through pitch contests, and some of whom went on to explore other avenues. So we're going to talk with them about their journeys and how pitch contests affected their lives and basically got them to where they are today. So let's meet our authors.
George Rage is a Lebanese American, having recently completed Pitch Wars as a mentee for his middle grade, Arab-inspired novel, Shad Hadid and the Alchemists of Alexandria.
Ryan LaSala grew up in Connecticut, but only physically. Mentally, he spent most of his childhood in the worlds of Sailor Moon and Xena Warrior Princess, which perhaps explains all the twirling. He studied anthropology and neuroscience at Northeastern University, and then abandoned both to instead pursue a career in making stuff. Craft projects, costumes, paintings, books, websites, all sorts of stuff. He technically lives in New York City, but has since transcended material reality and only takes up a human shell for special occasions, like brunch, and to watch anime, which is banned on the astral plane. Ryan is also the author of Reverie. You can visit him at ryanlasala.com.
Johnny Garza-Sevilla is a writer of contemporary young adult fiction. He enjoys telling stories that incorporates his own Latinx, Tajanex, and Chicanx identities with his queer identities, sprinkled with a light dash of childhood trauma. His first YA novel, Sunshine and Moonlight, about a high school senior who gets drunk at a party and accidentally comes out via Twitter post, is set to be released on a day, month, and year in the future. Johnny is currently represented by Claire Draper and the Bent Agency.
Claribel A. Ortega is a former reporter who writes YA and middle grade fantasy inspired by her Dominican heritage. When she's not busy turning her obsession with 80s pop culture, magic, and video games into books, she's filming videos for her YouTube channel or making GIFs for her small graphic design business, GIF Girl. Claribel's debut middle grade novel, Ghost Squad, is out now from Scholastic.
Born and raised in Arizona, Sonora Reyes writes fiction full of queer and Latinx characters in a variety of genres, with current projects in both kidlit and adult categories. Sonora is also the creator and host of the monthly Twitter chat, #QPOCchat, a community-building chat for queer writers of color hosted every second Tuesday of the month.
Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to our first official roundtable. I'm super excited to have you all here.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so the chat's gonna be super casual. I'm just gonna basically offer up some questions, and then we're just gonna open up discussion and whatever kind of comes to mind. Like, feel free to say it. So yeah, let's talk about pitch contests. So all of us have done pitch contests. We've done various ones, and we've had various success and fun, and I guess heartbreak over them as well. So I really want to hear how everybody feels about how things work differently for them. So the first thing I want to talk about is doubt, and basically what kind of doubt you felt before you decided to pitch for the first time, and kind of how you went about overcoming that doubt.
So super honest, the first time that I pitched, I didn't feel doubt because I was like, I hadn't been hurt yet. So I was like, everything's great. The second time I pitched, that was when it was really hard for me because I had already had an agent from the first CB pit, and I left that agent. And when I pitched the second time, nobody knew that I had left that agent. So it was sort of like, I waited till like, I wasn't going to do it. I was so scared. And I waited until like 3 or 4 in the afternoon because I was so nervous. Because it was not just me pitching. It was me pitching and saying to everybody like, hey, I left my agent and things didn't work out in a very public way. And I messaged Beth and I was like, Beth, should I do it? And Beth was like, do it right now. And I was like, okay, fine. And it was like one of those things like that always happens to me where I was like, nobody's going to care. And then it was just like a huge thing and it was great. And I'm glad I did it. But getting to that point of doing it was such a roller coaster that entire day. Cause I started off the day like, I'm definitely not doing this. And then just like spur of the moment doing it despite my doubts. And I'm glad I took the plunge, but it was really nerve-wracking.
That was
it's scary to do anything publicly.
You were like a superstar in that one. Didn't you get like a crap ton of likes on that one? A DV pit?
Yeah, it was a lot of likes, and it was likes from agents that I had never queried before because I was so insecure about myself as a writer. I was like, they would never sign me, so why would I query them? And those are the people who ended up requesting, and people who had rejected me in the past offered, and I was like, my time to reject you. Just kidding. Unless, but yeah, it was a good experience. It was definitely worth the risk. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. It was one of those lucky moments, but I'm glad I did it.
Similar to Clarabelle, I feel like I also didn't have like a ton of time for doubt because I found out about the contest that I participated in was also DV Pit, and I found out about it like a few days before it happened, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, no one's going to I don't know anybody. And so instead of like thinking about it as like an actual pitch contest, I was referring to the resources, and in them they were like, oh, like you could email like agents for like critique on your pitches. And I was thinking, I was like, whoa, I'm use this opportunity to like reach out to people, like make some friends, and I don't care if this goes well or doesn't. Ultimately, like I just found out about it, so it was more like exciting. I don't tend to doubt stuff before. Like I'm someone that just like jumps into things and only sees the positive, and then sort of like looks back and I probably should have thought about this a little bit more.
I think like for me, I kind of had to put it in perspective of like I don't have an agent. If I don't do this, nothing changes. Like it's the exact same situation, and like worst case scenario, I'm exactly where I am right now, and that's not worse than I am right now. So I just might as well kind of like with the chance of being like getting someone. I didn't end up like doing well in my pitch contest, but like it didn't hurt me. So
You did
I think it was
Pitmad, right?
I think so. I can't remember which one I did, but I was like, but I got like 1 or 2 agent likes. But it was just kind of like getting out of that. Like, I feel like a lot of people go into pitch contests with this huge expectation of like they want their tweet to go viral and like a ton of agents to like it, but really it doesn't. Like, if that happens, then that's really awesome, but it doesn't, and just putting in perspective and knowing that that doesn't have to happen for you to get an agent. Like, I got my agent through cold querying, and I also did a pitch contest, but, like, it kind of took a lot of the pressure off the pitch contest of just knowing that it doesn't have to happen that way.
In my experience, I don't think I had any new doubts kind of cultivate
because of the pitch contest. It was more just the doubt that I had since first drafting my book, like things like, is it likable? Is it sellable? Does this story even matter? Have I been wasting my time for months? That all kind of just became even larger because now I'm asking this to all of Twitter and to agents, and I'm crossing my fingers that someone tells me that it is likable and it is sellable and it does matter, and I should write more. And so I think that's more what it was for me.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I have two. So I was Pitch Wars as well as DV Pit. And for me, I would say it was more FOMO. I was like, what if I miss out on this, even though my manuscript may not be ready? Do I want to take this chance? And then ultimately, I was like, nope. So I just decided to take the plunge. And I had friends who'd done it in the past, and I just asked them. One thing I always tell people is just ask questions of anybody who can literally, I mean, Emery and Peter, you know this, you looked at my little prior to my participating. So I do owe you some thanks. I do.
Yeah, I mean, I found a lot of my critique partners and writer friends through DV Pit, so all the things that George said were super valid. Like, finding your community is a better reason to do it than thinking you are going to get an agent. And also, like, so me and Kat are the moderators of the DV Pit Hopefuls group on Facebook. And I think that because so many people get so many likes during DV Pit, people are like expecting it now. They're like, I only got like 10 likes. And I'm like, that's really good. Like, in what world isn't getting 10 requests from an agent good? I think the expectations for Twitter pitch contests have gotten very out of hand to the point where people are expecting like 100 likes, 50 requests, and it's like if they don't get that, they feel like it's a failure, but that's super not true at all.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like, oh, do you want to go?
No, it's all you.
When I'm thinking about I didn't have any doubts going into like the first one, but I sort of learned to like foster doubt going, because I participated in DV Pit like 3 times. Like the subsequent like editions of it, like I had new doubts about like, oh no, like I didn't realize that like virality was part of this, and that like like boosts from people like would play into things, and like I had not factored those into like my initial understanding of it. And so then like those became things that I could worry about, so I started to worry about them. But I never had like a super popular anything. Like all of my queries were like shot out of the sky by agents. I never had like one like request whatsoever, and even like my tweets for DV Pit like were like moderately accepted. But for the most part, it was like my friends misunderstanding what was going on. It was like I sort of fumbled my way into it, and they're also right. Like, in what world is like 10 requests not good? Like I had like several, and they made a huge difference, and like. Ultimately, that was great, but the better part of it was being able to like meet people that were supportive and similar in kind of the stories that they were trying to tell. Because I think those people actually ended up making a much bigger difference in our public opinion in general, not so much like the actual like transactional activity of the pitch contest itself.
So I actually did want to talk about connections and kind of like the way you like build community through like pitch contests, because I do feel like it's a really like unique way to kind of connect with people, and there's like so much going on, but I feel like I think we've all kind of made like like friendship connections through like DV Pit and PitMat and all of those. So I did want to talk about that a little bit too. Like what kind of connections do you think you can make through these pitch contests, like beyond just the agent connection? And what's some of the best ways to go about that and actually like introducing yourself to these people?
So I'll just say, as someone who met a couple of you through this, and I've met others in the past, like authenticity goes a long way, and people definitely can tell when you're not being authentic in terms of why you're reaching out to the community, and it's just to yourself, get to keep to yourself and not reciprocate. I know about myself that kind of turns me off of an interaction with someone else. I'm like, okay, they're just reaching out to me for themselves. I do want to help them still, but also kind of that give and take where I want to have a relationship going forward with you, not just with one interaction. So whenever I came with authenticity, I was able to make some pretty dope friends, and it worked out really well.
I agree with everything George said. Retweet.
I think sometimes too, like if you have connections with certain people, sometimes people will see that and they try to exploit that. Like for instance, there were a couple of agents that I had been mutuals with before going into DV Pit, and I know people I had people DMing me like boost my pitch, and these are people who I don't talk to, so it was very like, why are you asking me to boost your pitch if I don't know you? But I do. I guess I do also wonder, like, how do you guys go about filtering out that like noise when you have people that you know may kind of be like climbers versus people who are just legitimately trying to like foster relationships? How do you kind of gauge that, especially in an environment like a pitch contest where you know people are actively looking for agents and think that you'll somehow give them those connections?
So when I pitched, nobody was really asking me for boosts. I think because I offered, like, it's not really active anymore, but there was this Kidlit Author of Color page on Facebook that a lot of like people who are like published now were part of back when I got my agents. And when I did DV Pit the first time, like people like Angie Thomas was in there saying like, hey, if you guys need a boost, like I'll like boost you. So then once I got an agent, I did the same thing. When I was pitching, I also offered like, if anybody wants a boost, like, and we know each other, I'll do it. Nobody really asked me outside of that. I would have been like, maybe, I guess, if I liked the pitch. I won't boost something that I don't actually like, even if someone asks me to do it, because I feel like that's really inauthentic. So if I like something, I'll just boost it. And in terms of filtering people out, if anybody knows the answer to that.
I know the answer. I tell everybody here all the time, close your DMs. That's the answer. I say it all the time.
I mean, that's part of it, but like there's other ways people can like email you and like access you also if you're like a public figure.
Yeah.
Peter, you know the messages
No,
that
I
I get sometimes.
No, I know, but it's
And
like,
but closing DMs, yeah,
too.
that definitely helps. And I think it's a good skill to cultivate, because it only gets harder to filter out who is a genuine person the further you get into your career. And there is a lot of really ugly social climbing, and it sucks to think about that, but it's just the reality of publishing.
Yeah. I struggle with that a lot, actually, of being able to know like the difference between someone who is a genuine like friend and it's like a reciprocal kind of relationship, like they're not like trying to use me, but like as someone who like I try to like give away a lot of like query letter critiques and stuff like that, and sometimes afterwards people will try to get more than what I initially gave, and so that can be a little bit stressful because like I am trying to help, but at the same time I only have so much like time and everything, so that's something I struggle with, and I actually don't know how to like I guess set those boundaries of like, no, I can't do more than what I said I was gonna do. It's a struggle. I don't know.
I'm with you on that. I am so bad at like I so badly want to be like loved and liked and valued by people that like if people ask me for anything, like my first inclination is always to do it. Like I'm such a people pleaser when it comes to that, and a lot of people don't have that perception of me because I seem sort of like aloof and cold and unresponsive to like DMs and stuff. But that's very purposeful because I know that I will just like spiral into like trying to like make people happy and like like reach down type of thing. And so I when it comes to like DV Pit and like other things, I actually have the opposite approach where I try not to really boost too much. I'll try to help people like right up until the point of my ability to like critique them or something like that if they're asking for that. But then when it's actually in the throes of it, I tend to kind of shy away from the retweet. And I think like that's my thing, right? Like I'm scared of the optics of like catering to like just my friends or something like that, or like people befriending me for the wrong reasons. And it's something that I think I need to get better at parsing, because that's not always going to be the case. And I do really want to be able to like reach back down the ladder and like help people up. But the way that I've sort of gotten around that in my head is by helping people make their pitches as good as they can prior to it, and then kind of letting luck take care of the rest of it. But if I do see something that I think is like absolutely like up my alley. Something that like it would have to combine like Sailor Moon plus like cats. If I found that, that's more like a casing and not so much like a favorite.
I really like that, Ryan. And I also wanted to kind of explore that because the retweeting at the time of the event, kind of going back to the authenticity, if someone just retweets me and I don't know who they are, I've never heard of them, like I'll appreciate it, but I won't feel inclined to like automatically follow you and like be your friend. It has to be some kind of more meaningful interaction. So I mean, I don't know, what are people's thoughts on like retweeting at the time of the event that's really blown up recently with pitch contests?
Yeah, well, something I actually did also want to talk about too is kind of, I don't know how much y'all have been on Twitter today. I feel like we're all kind of Twitter buddies. But there was some people talking about how publishing, that like the best way to get an agent is to go to a conference and pitch at a conference. Yeah, and I know that with publishing there's this very big like concept of it's all who you know. Like if you know the right people, you're absolutely guaranteed to do well, and if you don't, then you won't. And like I think that's obviously a bit of a misconception. But I do wonder how you guys feel about as far as who you know and like who is retweeting you and who is replying to you, and how you think that actually comes into play in a pitch contest, and how much you think that actually affects the kind of attention and request that your pitch is getting.
I think there are many levels to that. Oh, I'm sorry. You can go.
No, you're good. Oh. Okay,
no, go. I've talked so much.
I think as someone who only had maybe 200 followers whenever I first did DV Pit last year, it was something in the back of my mind that I was thinking, okay, people who have this huge following of all these people who read and booktubers and agents already following them and all of this and authors following them, but there was going to be this kind of struggle for me to get attention. And I don't think that's necessarily super untrue, but I don't think it's also true at all, because at the same time, there's so many ways for agents to find you without needing 100 retweets. There's a Twitter search bar where they can look up the exact things they want, and that doesn't really matter as far as retweets go, because they're going to find it in the results. So, it is something that I think hangs around in the back of your mind, but at the same time, I don't think it's a measurement for success, especially with a pitch contest.
Yeah. I think the thing that I'll say about popularity is that, it will help you. Right, because at the end of the day, we are staging a contest on a platform that is built on algorithms that are meant to drive and control popularity and engagement, right? So if we're holding something on Twitter, and Twitter's sort of programmed to prioritize things that are popular and being engaged with, it is going to prioritize people that have that sort of clout and connection. What I'll point out though is that I didn't have that when I first started, and as I got to know people and as I made friends, by the time the next contest had come around, because I had taken the time to learn about the people that were in my community and boost them up in the meantime, I did have a lot of those connections in place. And by the third time that I was in DV Pit, still wasn't agented, but I had a ton more friends. And at that point, yeah, I'm sure a boost or two probably was very helpful, because I was on the radar of people that previously probably had no idea who I was. But it was because I was actively trying to I don't want to say ingratiate, but understand the community that I was trying to be a part of, and not just show up for the day of, but actually set up the party in advance so that I could partake in it and actually be part of it. I wasn't I think there's something kind of parasitic about the attitude of well, popularity is this fallacy and blah blah blah. It shouldn't be prioritized, but I'm just going to show up for basically this community's brief connections on the day of, and I'm never going to speak to them again. That's how the community works.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is I feel there's a lot of different levels to connections, right? Because I've been around the publishing world since 2013, 2014. I've known almost every agent for years. I went to parties with them. If it was a matter of who I knew, then I would have had an agent so long ago. Did it help in terms of getting requests? Absolutely. But my book wasn't there yet. So that's the problem also. And then you have the other side of it where it's it's a lot harder for marginalized writers to get agents anyway. So it's yeah, sure, if you're this sort of cis white person who's in publishing and your dad owns whatever company and they're best friends with a publisher, then yeah, you're probably going to get a book deal pretty easily because that's the way that the world works, right? So there's different levels to what a connection is. I feel like it is really disingenuous to say that connections don't help. They absolutely help. But for everyone who's on this panel, at least, and a lot of people that are probably watching, your work not only still has to measure up, it probably has to be a lot better than your peers anyway. So the connections alone aren't going to do it. It's a tool that can help you get to the next step. But I don't think that it's the only thing that you need, especially as a marginalized author. I would say if you can take advantage of it, yes. And sometimes the feed does go really fast. I know for DV Pit, you can't retweet. You can only quote tweet. And I think that helps it be less hectic. But for the other pitch contests, you can retweet. So it can get really sort of congested. So if you have someone who has 30,000 followers, all of whom are in publishing, quote tweeting you or retweeting you, yeah, then it's probably going to get more eyes on your pitch. A perfect example of that is a couple of years ago, there was this mermaid-related book, and it was quote tweeted and retweeted during DV Pit by all these like actually famous people, and she got a huge book deal. She signed with like Stephanie Meyer's agent, this really big deal, and part of that was because it was amplified in the way that it was. So I think it can make a difference, but it's not everything.
Right.
I think like, oh, sorry, was someone else going to say something?
I was just agreeing.
Oh, okay. So how I've always kind of looked at it, and I know that like connections definitely help, especially if you have like really big connections. But I think for the average person, who might think like the connections that you can make that will really get you far is like you're following on Twitter or something like that, or like, you know, having an agent follow you or something. And I think, at least so this is how I look at it, and like correct me if I'm wrong, but I always saw it as like it's not gonna get you in the door, it's just gonna get you to wherever you were gonna be faster. So like they'll read it faster if they know you, but if they don't like it, they're gonna reject it. So like it's it's like what Claribel said, like you still have to be there already. Like the book has to be ready, and it has to be good enough as is without the connection. So
Yeah. People have asked me for introductions all the time, and what I'll say to them is like, you look, even if I could, like, and I don't do this, but like, even if I like introduce you, even if you could cut the line, like you're still going to be pinned against the same consideration as like everybody else. You don't have to say no faster if you're not ready.
And to be honest, that's partly true with pitch wars and some of these pitch contests that people think like, oh, if I could just get into these, then it's the end all be all. Like that's just a way to skip the line. Your work is everything still. It doesn't matter what pitch contest you do, how many likes you get, how many retweets you get. And I think what everyone's trying to say is these contests are just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I don't know what all of you had as far as your experiences with once you like sent out the queries, but I know like for me, at least with my my second DV Pit, my first DV Pit was a flop, but my second DV Pit, I sent out my queries and like I didn't hear back for quite a while. Like I think I had a couple agents who took over 6 months to actually get back to me on it. So I know we talk about like doing these pitch contests and how they kind of like get you that like one step ahead. But even then, I don't think they necessarily dictate how fast an agent is going to get back to you, or even that an agent will necessarily prioritize. Because I even had, I remember I had an agent who had requested in that DV Pit, and they actually didn't get back to me for almost 8 months. They completely forgot about my pitch and completely forgot about my query. So I think, like, again, it's like it's a helpful tool, but it's I don't know. I guess the question is how helpful of a tool is it in comparison to like basically everything else you're doing as an author already? And I don't think there's necessarily a way to judge that.
Right. I think it's different for everybody, right? And sometimes there's a pitch that agents just happen to hone in on as like the thing, or a bunch of agents get like agents get really like thirsty about certain pitches and they want to compete with one another. So they see somebody getting a lot of likes, it sticks out in their head, and they want to immediately jump on it because they're like, I want to work with this author, I want to work with this book, it sounds really good. And so it becomes like a competition. And I think in that way it's really good for authors because then you get more choices. But that's not going to be every single pitch, obviously, because there's too many of them. But yeah, I think it's really subjective. It depends on sort of what's hot during that particular contest.
And even what's hot, like even like the hotness factor, right? Because I think at a certain point, like people notice, like, oh, this is getting a response. It's something I want to be part of, even if it's not necessarily something I would have requested otherwise. Like I'm just seeing a spotlight on it. Like I've talked to people who have like been that person who have gotten like 300 likes, and then they have to go through the task of like organizing who they're going to reach out to, and at the end of the day, like it's the exact same thing of like just a bajillion rejections and like maybe like a few actual conversations, and then I'm on the phone with them coaching them through like what questions to ask like during the call, and it's no different. Like it's sort of the equilibrium has come for them eventually.
Yeah, it's just more stressful.
I can't relate because like I never was that person, but I have a few of them down.
I also want to mention that, like, in terms of the whole connection things, I think sometimes people put too much importance on someone who's, like, popular on Twitter and what they can do for their career, or authors in general. Like, authors have a lot less power than people think they do. Like, unless you're Suzanne Collins, like, you're literally not going to probably be able to help anyone. And I think people believe, like, oh, that author has, like, 30,000 followers, so, like, if they like me, if I'm friends with them, it might be able to help. And it's, like, that's really not how publishing works.
So let's talk about schmagents. So for anybody watching who doesn't really know what a schmagent is, it's basically somebody who pretends to be an agent who isn't actually an agent. And generally, too, it also kind of encompasses people who may have actual may be part of like an actual agency, but are people who have been outed as abusers and kind of people who are not going to be able to sell your book. And I think something that's really interesting when it comes to like schmagents and just the industry as a whole, I think we have a tendency to kind of rely heavily on whisper networks and like publishing marketplace. And of course, like Publishers Marketplace, which of course is like a paid service. And whisper networks are kind of about like who you know and who you're able to connect to. So how do you go about vetting agents when you don't necessarily have connections to these things?
That's such an interesting question to ask right after like talking about how connections don't matter, because I feel like, well, not that they don't matter, but like how, oh, this and this and this. And it's like at the end of the day, if I didn't know people who could tell me, you know, I don't know all these agents, I don't know all these agencies, and so I have to ask everybody like, oh, you know, who's, you know, are they real, or you know, is this agency selling and stuff like that. So I can't even imagine what it must be like to be someone who doesn't know anybody in the industry.
But I think, like, I mean, not to like be redundant or belabor the former point, like the work is the same, right? Like if you're querying or if you're doing any of that, like a good amount of research will go into the people that you're sending your work to, right? Like, and because at bare minimum, you've got to figure out their requirements, and you've got to look at their site, and you've got to like kind of look at like previous clients, and you should be tailoring your actual queries to like that particular agent and maybe like who they represent. Like these are all things that make an effective query that also double up as research for that person too. And if you're savvy with it, and if you're in the community to begin with, like I think you'll start to notice where someone's requirements or the client that they work with don't actually match up with expectation or kind of legitimacy. And so I don't know, like not to like bring this down to the same answer as last time, but like the work I think is the same when it comes to vetting these people that you're sending your work to, even if you're kind of finding them via this contest.
I agree to a point, but I think that there's sometimes information that's not available, like readily available to everyone. Oh, yeah. And I think that's where it gets tricky, because like there are agents who like everybody knows are terrible, right? But everybody knows means like people who have already been in publishing for like X amount of years. And it's like, oh yeah, because, you know, this person sends out just the submissions that they get through queries to publishers, which an actual agent does. You can query them and then they'll just like sub your query to people without telling you. And yeah, it's incredible. But there are resources like, so Absolute Right is still really good. Because it's a forum and it's free, and people will talk about if an agent has done shady stuff. Like the person that I'm talking about is actually on that website, and like all the things that they have done to their clients in the past is on that website. So I don't know how often it's like updated, but something like that is really important. And I would say in terms of Publishers Marketplace, if you can ask someone or just get it for like 1 month and check what publishers they're selling to, that's really important, because a lot of times agents will be like, I'm number 1 in this category. Again, I'm subtweeting this person who I keep talking about. And the category, when you look at it, all their books are sold to like a publisher who's known for not paying their authors, right? And the way that you can find that, like Ryan was saying, is research. You research that publisher. Oh, I've never heard of them before. There are articles and articles about how they took years and in some cases never paid their authors. It's a lot of work, but it's also like your book that you worked on for a long time. And are you willing to just let it flounder and fail because you didn't do an extra like 2 hours of research? So there are some things that are hard to find out if you don't know people. That's the truth, because it's scary to speak out. And sometimes people aren't willing to say stuff, because when they are, they get, you know, threatened to be sued. So it can be really complicated. I know when people come to me, I tell them everything, because I'm a chismosa. But, you know, it's not everybody has access to my DMs. So
I like what you said about getting the Publishers Marketplace subscription for just 1 month. That's what I did. I waited until I got one offer, and then I got the subscription for 1 month and just looked at every agent who I was like left querying and who I wanted to offer me and all that. So I just did it when it was the most relevant. And that's like how I decided. Well, it was one of the factors of how I decided on which agent I wanted to represent me. So that's kind of what I like recommend doing, is like when you're querying, you can do the research that you can do without Publishers Marketplace. Like there's also like it's called Writer Beware. Have you all heard of that?
Yeah.
Like similar. But another thing like that is just kind of like warnings about people in the industry. And you can just like it, you know, the website I used was like, it was like the top 100 literary agencies or whatever, and I queried like one agent from every single one of those top agencies, because I just figured if it's in the top 100, they're probably fine, which maybe wasn't like accurate. But then I just got the subscription when it was relevant, and that worked out for me. So
yeah, as someone who's kind of in the throes of this right now, post Pitch Wars, I personally have been guilty of not using a lot of those sites, and I probably should, but the biggest resource out there is actually Twitter. For me, I look at, if I want an agent, it's pretty easy to tell if they have some sales, but then are they likable? Do their authors like them? And I think a great gauge of that is how they interact on Twitter, and I think that's a great gauge for them about you. It may be deceptive, but what I like to look for is, are their authors consistently engaging them on Twitter? Do these people seem genuine in there? It kind of goes back to the authenticity. Like, do I perceive these agents as tweeting authentically, or are they kind of doing it to further their own agenda, so to speak?
I wouldn't judge it based on Twitter. It just, people can just be a completely different person on there. Yeah. Also, not every good agent is on Twitter. I've seen people not want to query agents because they're not on Twitter. And that, like, Twitter is not the whole publishing industry. And that's, like, really one thing that people need to remember. Like, when you step outside of Twitter and, like, start going to events and engaging with people, you'll realize that. But there's so many agents that seem great on Twitter and they're not. So I like, you know, maybe it's helpful for some people, but I would just say to be very careful with judging agents based on their Twitter personality because it can be deceptive.
I was actually going to say something similar to what you just said, Clarabelle, but I was actually going to say that when I did use Twitter to vet my agents, what I actually did was I didn't use, like, I wouldn't rule anyone out based on, like, their lack of presence on Twitter. And I wouldn't necessarily, like, choose someone based on their presence on Twitter, but I did nix a bunch of people from my list based on things that they did on Twitter. Like, for instance, if I saw people who were constantly degrading authors of color or constantly, you know, like boosting books that were like authors of color were saying these are harmful to me. That basically ended up narrowing down my list a bit because I don't think you can really tell if someone is an agent or a schmagent from Twitter, but I do think you can get a gauge of if that person seems like they're actually going to root for you or if they're just kind of using you. In that regard, like if they seem like they're not authentically engaging with authors of color and like diversity, then that may not be someone you would necessarily want to work with as a marginalized author.
Yeah, I would say like my connection to this conversation would be like, I remember when I was considering agents during like kind of the offer stages, like writing queer characters, like an actual, like an actual respect for like those communities and that identity was really important to me. And so the person I ended up signing with, her name's Veronica Park, she's great. But part of why I signed with her is because I went to her content and it was just full of like queer shit. Like I was like, oh, this person, like they're actually part of this world outside of like the whole like agent thing, and like it helped lend validity to a lot of what I felt that they liked about like my actual work. So it added points for them. But this is also after doing like research and talking with them and a lot of other stuff that kind of legitimized them.
So something else I was thinking about is like, when you're pitching in a pitch contest and you're getting all these requests, a lot of the time I know people don't really feel like it's worth the time to sort through all of these requests and kind of like, you know, nix the bad agents right out the gate. So when it comes down to it, is it worth querying an agent who may potentially be someone harmful down the road or someone that you know that you would never want to work with? And I'm like looking at Clarabelle as I'm saying this, but is it really worse to have a bad agent than no agent?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You should never query somebody who you would be unhappy siding with, because if they offer, it's going to be hard for you to say no, especially if they're your only offer. And you can end up convincing yourself, especially if you've been trying to get an agent for a long time. And trust me, because this happened to me, and I know exactly what I'm talking about. The first time I got an agent, it was a sole offer. I felt in my heart that it wasn't right, but because I was so desperate for an agent, I just said yes. And I was like, well, this person seems legitimate and they're with a good agency and like all of this stuff. And it ended up being the wrong choice. And the book, you know, I was lucky enough to be able to go on sub with it again with my new agent. That almost never happened. So I would have really sacrificed the book that I spent almost 5 years working on because I signed with an agent who didn't know what they were doing. And it's like, if you're willing to potentially not sell the book and you're okay with that, I mean, that can happen either way, but the chances of it happening when you have a bad agent and just sort of like sacrificing something that you worked so hard for, it's really not worth it. It's better to wait and to wait for someone who's the right person for your career, especially because, you know, if you're not getting an agent right now, it could be that the market is not right for your book. And you could be forcing something that just shouldn't be happening right now. And sometimes when you wait for those things and they happen when they're supposed to, everything falls into place in a really beautiful way. But you have to be so ultra patient for it. It's about longevity, not like getting somebody right now, because that is going to end up getting you someone who's not good for your career. And it's really not worth the stress. It was horrible. And like I say that with firsthand experience, it's really not worth it.
Totally agree.
Okay, so one thing I do want to like address too is just kind of what you guys see as like particular red flags for people who are querying. Like what might they see either like on Twitter or just kind of like scrolling through Google what are things that, like, if you see that, run for the hills, do not look back, like, definitely do not query that agent?
They ask you for money for like any reason. Like if they want you to pay to query them, if they want you to pay for an edit, like any whatever reason they have, if they ask you for money in any way, shape, or form, just don't do it.
Yeah, even if they refer you to like an editor and they're like, oh, this is a really good editor, like they could be getting a cut from that person for that referral. So anything money based for sure is a huge red flag.
Out of curiosity, just because I'd never experienced it myself, has anybody here on this like panel experienced that?
I've seen
not personally. Yeah.
No.
It's happened to friends before though, where I've seen agents tell them, maybe you should get this editor when it's someone who's really expensive. And I'm like, no, don't do it.
I've seen in the past some agents, well, schmagents, not really, yeah, just like some like when I first started querying before I like ever got Twitter, it just based on a Google search of querying literary agents, there were some things that I found that were like that it was like asking for money to submit your query, and I didn't do it, but I remember seeing that and wondering if it was like worth it. Yeah, I think like the downside too of getting an editor, like if you just feel pressured to get an editor before you ever query, I've heard some agents say that like that kind of sets their expectations for what your work is going to be like, and if you're not going to be able to ever write something that clean on your own, or at least your next whatever the next thing is you submit to them, they're kind of going to be like, I don't know, disappointed that like that's, you know, not the example that you first sent them, and so it might hurt your relationship.
I would say also if an agent is asking you for an exclusive submission, like not an R&R with an exclusive, just like only query me, that's not a good look. Ever.
I also think like this is not. I think a lot of legit agents do this without even like really realizing it, but because like it's Twitter and people vocalize things a lot, like I kind of flinch when I see agents like flippantly talking about like the queries that they're getting in like a really like dismissive or like it really drives me crazy. And I get it, like the 10 queries in 10 minutes or like whatever that shit is. Like sometimes it feel like really like educating, like, oh, this didn't have my name on it, it's a pass. But I think sometimes it's like I'm a sassy New York lady and strike from my left, and I think that there's like a performance to rejection that a lot of agents kind of, whether or not they admit it, like revel in, or at least in that moment. And maybe they have like noble means, but I think if you know, even if they're the most noble person, even if they're the kindest, if you're like the person who you have a query in their inbox, that can say anything, and you're gonna find a way to like make it about you, and you're gonna like crush your ambition, like kind of reading into these things. And so I mean, at worst, I hate when people sort of like down talk the people that are querying. I think it's really inappropriate. But even at its best, I think it's not a great look for an agent to have like these like monologues about like how much they're rejecting everybody.
Like I had someone actually in my DMs once really upset because they had just queried an agent and they were like, yeah, this person was totally subtweeting my query on Twitter. And I think agents think that we don't know when they're subtweeting us. But I did actually, I remember after the DV pit where I got my agent, in that time, there was an agent who was subtweeting about a book. And it was funny because there was someone I had sent my full to, and they basically described my book like perfectly, but like without too much detail. So I knew that they were subtweeting me too, and that was like, it's like from that moment on, I was like, if this agent even offered, I would reject them because I'm already like, I have such a bad taste in my mouth over what they said about my book. Like I feel like that's, I feel like it's
right.
you don't want to estrange people that way.
No, I totally agree. And like, I think the counter argument to this is, and a lot of agents are like, oh my God, we're agents. We're put under this like lens, but we're people too. And like, how come we can't talk about like our grievances? And my answer to that is like, if you're soliciting, like if you're coming to Twitter as a professional and soliciting content from creators as a professional, like on Twitter, like you are entering a professional space, right? Like, you're sort of creating that around yourself. So, like, if people are looking to you then, like, and at your tweets and at your feed, and, like, you're tweeting, like, you know, flippantly about, like, your actual work, like, they're going to take it to heart because you've taught them that that's kind of where you do business. Which isn't to say that agents can't, like, complain. Like, I love when agents complain to me. I love when, you know, people have, like, these, like, crazy stories because they truly do deal with, like, a lot of shit. And I don't think that, like, this isn't to say that they have to deal with, you know, suffer in silence. I just think that, like, before people hit send, they need to kind of consider how they might, just like Emery says, like, estrange them from a potential client.
Right,
Just
and
get
there's
a
some
private.
right. Get a private account, and I think there's a difference between sort of like complaining about someone being abusive in your inbox and like being really snarky and mean about an author just trying to query you, which is like what your job is and like what you're trying to do, and it's just very strange to me. And like we are asked so often to like be respectful and follow the rules and do research and do all this stuff, and it's really sort of hypocritical for them not to also show us the same respect that we're asked for. So agents, stop it.
Oh my God.
And some of them get really specific too. Some of them are not vague. And I'm like, think about the poor author who is probably reading this and crushed right now. It's so mean. It's so mean.
Yeah, and I can make anything about me. Like, an agent could be tweeting, like, they could be tweeting about, like, oh, this 50-year-old woman sent me her memoir, and I was like, I swear to God, anything.
I actually did the opposite. Like, whenever those agents, I would query some agents who did the 10 queries or the however many queries, and whenever they said something good, I was like, it's mine.
I love that. I love that so much.
Okay, well, I think we actually are at our time limit now. So I want to say thank you all for coming. And like, I don't know if you guys want to maybe go around and do a little self promo before we close out.
Always.
I just like Ryan, kick us off, man. Kick us off.
Me and Ryan have prepared choreography.
I mean, I'll go, and actually, I don't want to plug myself. So coming out of Pitch Wars, I just want to plug my like wonderful mentors, Adriana Cuevas and Sarah Capit, and they both have books coming out they should pre-order. So Get a Grip with Vivi Cohen and Nestor Lopez, The Total Eclipse with Nestor Lopez. Definitely support your marginalized authors.
Sweet.
That's all I would say.
That was so sweet. I'm gonna promote myself.
Yes.
And my book Ghost Squad is coming April 7th. You can pre-order it at buyghostsquad.com and follow me on Twitter. I'm Clarabelle_Ortega. And Instagram too, same handle.
I would also like to promote Clarabelle.
I've been promoting you this whole time because your book is like right there.
Like giving me some good airtime in the background.
Yes.
It's not in the background of my photos, but it is. I'm Ryan LaSalle. You can follow me on Twitter at Ryality. That's RYALITY. I wrote Reverie. It's a young adult fantasy novel. Came out in December of last year. So if I was funny, you might like my book. And yeah, I have other stuff coming out too. But definitely support your marginalized creators. Boost each other. You're a community.
I'm Sonora. You can call me Sony. I host QPOC chat every second Thursday of the month. So, like, queer writers of color, if you want to join, you can just, like, look that up. #QPOC chat. And sign up for my newsletter. I do query critiques every month. And I highlight, like, a published, or not published, like an agented author's query letter that got them their agent. So if you can sign up on my website, sonorareyes.com. And follow me on Twitter, Sonora Reyes.
Okay, well, I'm Johnny. You can follow me at Johnny Felipe. And I don't have anything to promote yet because my book is on sub, so please light your candles for me. And if you're in publishing watching this, vote for me. And, yeah.